Hey guys, how's it going? Ruben here from the Midnight Garage. Well, today I'm going to show you guys how to do a battery relocation to the boot of your car, or the trunk, or whatever you want to call it. I have been alluding to making this video for quite a while now, I think like 3 or 4 months. And today I'm actually going to make it. But before we start, I first want to get a couple of things out of the way. First thing, why do people actually do this? Well, one group of people does it to relocate some of the weight of the car from the front to the back to give it a more 50-50 weight distribution. And other people do it just to make the engine bay a bit cleaner. And we're going to do the battery relocation with the Honda City. The main reason I'm going to do it with the City is because I need the space as soon as I'm going to swap the engine. Well, step 1 is obviously to remove the battery, so we're going to start with doing that. Well, that already looks a lot cleaner without the battery. Now, I was trying to remove the positive lead and I noticed this. Wow, that's fucking dangerous, man. So obviously I'm going to replace this as well. I'm at a loss for words right now. Alright, everything's out. This was the negative cable and this was the positive cable. Well, let's explain to you guys what we're going to do. Well, let's first start with the negative cable. Some are different than others. With every car usually is different, but the main idea is pretty much the same for everyone. So this one obviously goes to the battery. This is where it's connected to the chassis, and this is where it was connected from the chassis to the gearbox. Now, obviously for the battery in the back, we're going to need a new terminal and a new point where it's connected to the chassis, and we're going to make that. And for the gearbox, we're going to need one as well. So this one is still going to be connected to the chassis. Don't forget this. It's very important that you don't forget it, because you will definitely get some ground issues if you don't put this cable back. Next up, we have the positive terminal. This side obviously was hooked up to the battery. Then we have this short wire that was connected to the main fuse, and you've seen the main fuse because that was a massive botch job which I'm going to fix. And then this piece is connected to the starter motor. Now this is pretty much the same for any car. And what we're going to do is basically put a junction point here so that there are 2 wires going out, and then have a very thick wire going from here all the way to the back to the battery. Well, that leaves us with the wires. Now, obviously you want them as thick as possible. Why? Because the battery cable is a lot longer and therefore it has a lot more resistance, and therefore you need it to be thicker. I personally prefer 50mm square, and then when it branches off to 35mm squared, or 0 gauge to 2 gauge. But for this car, since it's a really small car and I don't have much electronics with it, I'm going for 35mm squared for the main cable, and when it branches off to 25mm squared, or 2 and 3 gauge. That brings us to the second subject, where to place the battery. Now, there is obviously no one position where that's the best position, but a general rule of thumb is that you want it on the back side of the car, and then on the passenger side. Why on the passenger side? Well, then you can slightly offset your own weight when driving the car, and usually the people that race their car want to have the car balanced a little bit. Now, obviously, if you have audio or any other rules, or for example you have a mid-engine car and you want the weight more to the front, you need it somewhere else, but this is just a general rule of thumb. And this is the place where I'm going to put the battery. Now, the next bit is very important, as it's about the battery. If you're going to place your battery in the passenger area of the car, like I'm going to do, it is highly recommended to go for a gel battery. You can go with a regular battery, but there's a vapor that's coming off the battery, and my English isn't good enough, so I had to look it up, and it's called fulminating gas. And if it reaches the right mixture in the car, and you are going to start it, or there's some electric spark, or you're going to light a cigarette or something, it might explode. It's very unlikely that it happens, but there's a possibility that it happens. If you're going to have your regular battery in the car and it's in the boot or something, make sure your door is open or whatever before you start it, so at least the mixture goes partially out of the car. And the second part might differ per country, but at least in Holland it's illegal to have a regular battery in the passenger area of your car. So what I'm going to do next, because I'm going to keep it for now, is actually illegal. There are 2 ways to get around that. You can either place your regular battery in a box with some hoses going out of it, so that at least the fulminating gas can vent out of the car and is not in the car itself. The second is to get a gel battery. Now, there are 2 batteries that most people seem to use, and that's the Optima battery and that's an Odyssey battery. Now I've had both, and my preference is more for the Optima battery because it lasts longer. The Odyssey battery is great as well for a race car, but if you have a regular car with audio or whatever, an Optima is a better choice. It's bigger, however, so you know, those are the two options you can go for, and it's basically up to you which one's best. Now, a very important thing is that's the reason why I am not going to put a gel battery in the car right now, is that I need to store the car for 3 months. It's a very stupid law in Holland that I'm not allowed to drive the car between December and February. So the car is going to be stored, and gel batteries in general don't like to be stored, and as soon as I believe the voltage gets below 6 volts, the battery is just dead and you can't use it anymore. And since gel batteries are quite expensive, I'm going to hold off purchasing a gel battery until February. Another very important advantage of gel batteries over regular batteries is that gel batteries can be placed at any position you like. A regular battery like this has to be placed like this, otherwise the fluids might leak out, and with a gel battery that's not the case. So keep that in mind. There are more places to hide a gel battery in comparison to a regular one. Now obviously there are no holes for it to tie it down, so I'm going to drill some holes for the battery tie down. Well, the battery is now properly tied down, and I've made the negative lead as well. General rule for this is that it needs to be as short as possible, so it's hooked up to a bolt hole here. The first wire is already in place, the one going from the gearbox back to the chassis. Nothing much interesting about that, just don't forget it. That's the most important thing. And now we're going to make the positive lead, so I'm going to remove this one right now. Alright, the rear part of the positive terminal is done as well. It is very important that you put a fuse on it as soon as possible. If you don't fuse it and something goes wrong with the wiring somewhere, because maybe something rubs and the casing goes off, you might burn down your whole car, and I don't think you want that, so fuse it as soon as possible. It's best to fuse it right here, and there are some terminals for audio, for example, that have fuses right here. That's the best, but for now I'm going to have it here. This is still pretty good, because it's going to be behind here and pretty much nothing will touch it. Now it's time to do the front. I've hidden the cable behind the body panels. If you have a strip car, I would recommend getting some clamps and tie it all down so it doesn't move around. And it's done now. Gotta love editing, right? This one will go to the starter motor, and this one will go to the main fuse box. I'm going to keep the junction block inside the car. You can put it in an engine bay, it doesn't really matter, but I like to keep the engine bay a little bit less cluttered, so that's why it's going to stay in the car. Alright guys, all hooked up. I've put some nice snakeskin over the wires, because it looks a bit better in my opinion. This one's going to the starter motor, this one's going to the main fuse box, and I replaced the fuse in the fuse box. And now the only thing left to do is start it and see if it works. Alright guys, moment of truth. 1, 2, 3. Yeah! Well guys, that was it. The battery's relocated, everything works, and I'm very happy. So that was the video for today. I hope you liked it. Leave a like if you did, and subscribe if you want to see more how-tos, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.